Hey y'all, we're still talking about Ephesians this month, and so I just wanted to say a little bit more about Ephesians chapter 2, and especially what we talked about on Sunday morning, which is that Christ is our peace. And man, how much we need that word today to know that Christ is the one who gives us peace. And I just want to elaborate a little bit more on what that could mean for each and every one of us. One is that Christ is our peace, meaning that he has made peace between our lives and God. So Romans chapter 5, we're familiar with this, that since we're justified by faith, we have peace with God through Jesus Christ. And we have access to the grace in which we now stand. And so the knowledge that we have peace with God, that our lives are justified and that we have access to grace gives the heart peace, because we are trusting God and we are aware of God and we believe that God is believing good for us, doing good for us, wanting good for us, that sort of thing. Another way that Christ is our peace is that we have peace that is different than what the world offers to us. And we get that from John chapter 14, verse 27, where Jesus says, I'm leaving you my peace. My peace I'm giving to you. I don't give to you as the world gives, but I'm giving you my peace. And one of the ways I've experienced that recently is through the season of Lent and the Lenten sacrifice that I've made, and the kinds of ways that denying self has really exposed some of the ways that I trust in the things of the world, or I trust in things that I put into my body. I trust outside sources for a peace that really Christ has promised. And it's pretty amazing that in the midst of these days, the way that anxiety, or the way that frustration, or the way that chaos, the way that different things stirs up things in me, and I want to reach for something out there to make me feel better and to give me a greater sense of peace. But man, the promise is that Christ has peace to give to us, and he will give it to us, and it's better and it's more fulfilling and it's more sustaining, and it's actually the peace that we're searching for. It's not a temporary thing. It's a lasting kind of peace that we can have in our lives because of the peace that Christ gives to us. So in the midst of Lent, in the midst of the sacrifice, in the midst of self-denial, learning to say shh to the flesh, and learning to recognize the kinds of ways that I might be, trying to substitute the peace that Christ gives for something else. And thinking about that makes me think of the coping. What do I do to cope? What do we do to cope with what's going on? Especially like in these days where we can't be around each other. We can't do things that we would normally do. That not only removes maybe some of our unhealthy coping practices, but a lot of healthy coping practices. And so when we can't do these particular things, what would be good for us to do so that we can have peace? One particular way that I've practiced over the years is recognizing that when I'm anxious and I have a level of anxiety, is instead of trying to address that anxiety in some artificial way, is to stop and look underneath the anxiety, to say, maybe to ask this question, what am I feeling that's causing the anxiety? As I've heard, anxiety is not a feeling in and of itself. Anxiety is a physiological response telling me that I'm having a feeling. But what is that feeling? And sometimes it's pretty difficult to identify what feeling that is. But is it fear? And if I'm experiencing fear, what need is really going on in my life so that I can address that instead of trying to push down the anxiety, get rid of the anxiety in a temporary or artificial kind of way. Am I experiencing sadness or am I experiencing loneliness? Those are feelings. And what do I do when I'm experiencing those sorts of things? And then, third, a way that Christ is our peace is that He has peace for our hearts and our minds. Now, we are familiar with Philippians chapter 4. Don't worry about anything, but in everything, with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And so peace functions like a guard dog, like a watchdog over our hearts and over our minds, even guarding our hearts and our minds from our own understanding. From Proverbs chapter 3, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And man, how many ways does my understanding of things, my understanding of events, my understanding of what's happening with me or what's happening out there create a kind of anxiety or create a kind of worry in my own life? But the peace of God surpasses my understanding. It's beyond my understanding. It actually envelops my understanding, and it is so much more and so much better. And so I hope today that you have peace, that you know the peace of God, and that you know that if you're struggling with being at peace, that you can have that Christ is our peace. And so receive the blessing of the Psalms. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.